Honorable Premier Alden McLaughlin, Minister of Employment. Honorable Deputy Premier Mr. Moses Kirkconnell, Minister of Tourism. Honorable Mr. Dwayne Seymour, Ministry of Health, Employment, Culture and Housing. Mr. David White, Councillor for Tourism, Transport and Sports. Mr. Strand Bodden, Chief Officer, Minister of Tourism. Ms. Rosa Harris, Director of Tourism. Mr. Joseph Wood, Port Authority, Cayman Islands. Mr. T.J. O'Sullivan, Director of Compliance, Global Tour Operations, Royal Caribbean. Verdant Isle Technical Team Port Partners. Those of you streaming us live on the various social media platforms, those of you listening via radio, Radio Cayman, ladies and gentlemen in our audience, good evening. I am Sabrina Turner, and I have been asked to moderate this evening's proceedings. This is the 6th of 9 meetings that is being held throughout our island. The next town hall style meeting will be held next Tuesday, December 3rd, and that'll be at the East End Civic Center. All meetings start at 7. I would like to take this opportunity to invite you, please, to look for your smartphones and any other devices that you have and kindly put them on vibrate or silent. This evening's meeting will include presentations, a PowerPoint presentation. It will be a number of videos, and we will also speak and hear from some pioneers in the taxi industry. We would like you to indicate by raising your hand throughout the evening if you have not been given a magazine, a pen, and a piece of paper, because there will be no roaming mics. We ask you to wait until the presentations have come to their conclusion, and then you write your questions on the pieces of paper, and they will be asked in the question and answer segment. Refreshments are at the back of the room. Please feel free to partake of them throughout this evening's proceedings. Now that is all over, I will invite Honorable Minister Dwayne Seymour to take the podium for the official opening.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Tonight is a very important night, and as a government, we prepare you to participate in what is known as a historic event and the first people's-initiated referendum in the Cayman Islands. We as a government is not here to tell you how to vote. We are here to assist and aid you with information so you can make an informed decision with the facts and to provide you with as much information that we have available. The government went to great lengths to pull the trigger on the referendum as soon as the target was reached. There has been much said, as you know, and much posted, and a lot to gain support against the port. And there are those who are playing politics, and some who have commercial interests protecting their grandfather rights, and yet some who are true environmentalists and want to ensure we handle our environment with care. And we have always listened as a government. When I campaigned, I said I needed to be assured that 7 Mile Beach would not be affected, that there was not a solid concrete base poured throughout the whole length of the pier, and that no one would have control over our port. And one of my pet peeves is that we have entrepreneurial opportunities for Caymanians in the eastern districts. And I met with the Deputy Premier many of times once I got elected, and to get some clarity on these points, and was not only assured verbally, but given a presentation to alleviate my fears. This is a very important part of the Cayman Islands economy, cruise tourism, and more Caymanians and entrepreneurs in this industry than that of stayover tourism. Albeit, we welcome stayover tourism, and appreciate this sector as many cruise passengers return as stayover passengers. In traveling throughout the world, when people ask where I'm from, they often reply, I came there on a cruise, or a friend or a family member did, and that they want to visit as a stayover tourist. So cruise is a valuable way of encouraging more to the island. And we try to convince you that cruise tendering is the route to continue. I can only tell you my experience right out at Sports Dock when the government was invited to a meeting, and trying to board the cruise ship, we had to actually time or step to get up on the ship. So I remember too well. The boat or the ship keeps moving and is sometimes dangerous, in my opinion. Please don't get me wrong, we appreciate the tendering and it's a professional operation. But with everything as a country, if we don't get with the times, we get left behind. So most of us, most of all the third world countries, all have piers, and we are considered the first world, and we don't have one. So we need not to have any impediments to cause cruise companies not to consider us with vessels that carry passengers with higher yield, stopping in Cayman and blessing us with their kindness. I asked my Bodden town people, if we were to vote against the port being built here in Georgetown, that your pristine area of Bodden town, which I don't support, would be the alternate choice. So 1,000 feet of your reef, dredging some 40 feet to accommodate the ship's drafts, etc. Do you want it in your backyard? If you don't, please look at this presentation, as we have many who have their minds made up and don't want the facts. And after we do so tonight with this presentation, we hope that we help you make your decision and not to lead anyone on how to vote, but voting yes would cancel the thoughts of Bodden Town being an option. So you have heard some of the superfluous comments and negativity, and we don't need to have any further divide in our country and to work to find our unity, like after Hurricane Ivan. What I would appreciate is less politics about this matter and a more open-minded approach to ensure the government gets it right, if so allowed to build, with all measures to ensure our environment is less disturbed as less as possible. I am very satisfied with the steps the government has taken to address comments and concerns from the public. Ladies and gentlemen, we asked the team to go away and bring back more than one option to caucus, and I was very proud of caucus decision. We had to choose either A or B in caucus, and caucus chose B, a reduced cargo port. I'm very proud of them. And not many dive sites will be affected, if any, and our approach in coral replacement, etc. Sir Bustamante said, be not afraid, do your duty towards your countrymen, towards humanity. They will thank you, at least in silence, and at the right time, when the good Lord sees it, he will bless you. even though you might not be aware of it. Well, I can't say that I have any sugar estates here in Cayman like Bustamante had, but we have a waterfront that we tirelessly fought to ensure our people have opportunities. No, I don't come from a family of politics, and I can confess I am not a student of politics like the Premier, but more born as a gladiator who works in front of the scene, behind the scene, in the scene, to ensure people know that I am a student of caring, sharing, and love for humanity. So I got elected because I wanted to make a difference. I took this job to uplift my people. So let us not act as 5 fingers, but 1 fist. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you and good night.
Thank you, Honourable Dean Seymour. I'll now invite to the podium our Honourable Premier to speak.
Good evening, everyone. After that powerful speech like that by my minister, I don't think I need to say very much. I just want to thank everyone for coming, and to those of you who are listening on Radio Cayman or watching via live streaming, good night. I just want to touch on a few things. What you will see tonight in the presentations that I made and in the videos, we will answer, I think, the key questions that most people have. Why the need for the port? We will answer questions about the financial viability of the project, whether the government can afford it. We will answer key questions about the environment, because we know that that is probably the principal concern that most people have. And we will answer the questions about the carrying capacity of the island, that is the ability of this island with the infrastructure that we have and the attractions we have to cope with the projected increase in passengers. So I am certain, because I have seen these presentations and these videos more than, than I care to talk about, that the answers to all of those questions will be found there. We hope that once that is done, we will be able to answer any other questions that you have. There is another matter that has arisen since last night, which had been threatened for some time, and that is the possibility of the referendum being derailed and not being held on the 19th of December. The National Trust has filed an application for what is called judicial review of the decision to proceed, and are seeking injunctions, that is, orders to stop the referendum from proceeding. The CPR, the Cruise Port Referendum Group, have applied to the court for what are called protective cost orders. They are interested in stopping the referendum from going ahead, but they want orders from the court which essentially would say that if they get what they want, that even if they lose, they wouldn't have to pay government the costs involved in the proceedings. So there is now considerable uncertainty about whether or not the referendum will proceed. The government is taking legal advice. I spoke to the Attorney General just before I arrived here, and I've also been in contact with the Solicitor General. So we are taking legal advice. We will have to see what the court does about these applications for leave. What that involves is the court has to first agree that they can bring the proceedings. So all of that notwithstanding, we are pressing on with trying to educate the populace about these issues, the need for the port, its financial viability, how we are addressing the environmental issues, and how we will cope with the increased number of passengers. We will see what happens over the next few weeks. The referendum is just over 3 weeks away, or at least the proposed date. now. So I thank you all for your attention, and I hope we have a very useful and productive dialogue over the course of this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Premier. I'll now invite to the podium the Honorable Moses Colonel to speak.
Very pleasant good evening to everyone. It's good to be in Bodden town. I'll just take a minute to outline where we are from my ministry and the responsibility 6.5 years ago that the Premier assigned to myself and my ministry to be responsible for tourism. We take it extremely seriously and understand that we're one of the pillars of the economy. We also understood, challenged by the Premier, that we had an opportunity to move this country forward through tourism. And we had to stand alone because we knew that the financial industry was working extremely hard, but under challenge. What we did, as you can see, is we first looked at how we could attract more visitors who would have a higher spend and would be basically our export. So we had 2 infrastructure projects and the third people project that, in my opinion, was the most important. That was the hospitality school. The hospitality school is complete. Young Caymanians come out, they get placed, and we're extremely proud of them. The airport, we knew that it was built for 500,000 people. If we were going to grow our stayover business, we had to expand the airport, we had to understand how to do it, and we had to do it with no money. So we found a formula of how to do that through passenger arrival head tax. It was an extremely successful project. I'm sure each one of you have enjoyed it going in and out of the country. We've just now signed another $30 million contract to lengthen the runway and put more apron space in. So that's moving in the right direction. This year, our stayover will bring over 500,000 people. Kudos to the team that works so hard on it. Our other part of infrastructure that's an opportunity to the country, and we made a policy decision to grow cruise. To grow cruise, we have to do what we do with everything else. We have to be the best in the region. We have a high standard of education. We're working extremely hard on our infrastructure. Our social responsibilities met through social service needs. We have the best hospital, the best health system in the region. We see people coming here from North America. This is Cayman. We have to be the best in cruise as well. That's how we do things. So the opportunity for us is to grow the business and provide the next generation successes of opportunity, employment, and a way of life that we have enjoyed. We understand clearly that it's a balance that we fight with every day. We have to protect the environment for the next generation and the generations to come, but we have to protect the economy as well. So that's the balance. And I hope that those are the questions that you'll give us tonight. Challenge us. Let us answer the question for you. We have some of the best people in the world, globally recognized, that have come here to do this work, to make sure that we do it in the right way. And that's what this government demands. I want to just quickly say that the growth for the Eastern District, challenged by Minister Seymour to move east, do more, will be very beneficial by the cruise berthing, because as the infrastructure improves, the traffic improves, the roads get better, the movement of people when ships are able to stay longer, the higher spend, and the year-round business, the capacity, will mean that instead of Pedro having a 15% growth rate in the last year, it'll continue to have that year after year. Botanical Garden, 5% growth rate last year, it'll have it year after year. Crystal Caves continue to be. Our tour operators, our taxi drivers will benefit from that, and that is the linkage that comes into the Eastern Districts and Bodden Town. So we believe that there's tremendous successes ahead of us. We believe that we have a tremendous project a standalone deal that we're happy to talk about, and there's no risk to government with it. It's just something that is good for us to move the country forward. Because I tell you this straight out, we have to build our economy to take care of our people and protect the next generation. I'm so glad you're here tonight. I'm also thrilled that some of the taxi drivers are here, some of the tour operators are here, and I know I'm looking forward to some of their presentations. Thank you all very much for coming out.
Thank you, sir. I'll now instruct you to direct your attention over to the screen where you will be presented with two short videos. One on the cargo port by Willem Jacobs, and the second one will be a tourist video with their reactions to the tendering.
I've been at the port from 1995. All these vessels keep on getting bigger. We are having more and more actually containers coming in. If you look at the figures from back in 2010, we actually had about 22,000 TEUs coming in. And at the end of actually 2018, we were up at actually 30,000. So this is a fairly large increase in only 8 years. So if we continue with that same actually trend, another 8 years, we're going to be 35, 37% more. And we just do not have that space as it is now for us to keep on doing this. We cannot move all the containers that come in off of a vessel from the dock up to the cargo center within a single night. All of the actually increased volume, it is just not making it possible anymore.
Tendering makes it really rough for a wheelchair to get on and off, especially if you get some waves.
I would prefer a dock to be freely go on and off this boat as I wish.
Having a dock would be more convenient.
Many long lines.
I said it was very hot in the tender coming over, so it was not fun. It was hot, but dripping. It was just too hot coming across.
I'm just going to stay on the ship and avoid the chaos.
Yeah.
It just really cuts down your ability to be on the island longer.
We've been with Norwegian many times, and we've never had this.
There's no doubt about it. There needs to be a pier here.
Well, the tendering is short. It's just that the lines are long, so the pier would be better.
We've been in line for over half an hour, and it goes all the way back. You can't even see the end of the line, and we've been in it for half an hour. Last tender's supposed to be at 3.
I would be in favor of the pier because it would eliminate these lines waiting for the tender ship boats to come.
We've been standing here for a really long time.
We had to tender in, and it took us a really long time to get off the boat. So our excursions were supposed to start at 8. We didn't get here until 9:30.
I don't like to be tendered, and I don't have to like to stand in this line like this, stand in this hot sun, and it makes it easier.
Because nobody stops for more than 8 hours, and you end up spending 3 hours doing the tendering process. So actually it would be advantageous for the community because they would make more money because people would be on the island longer instead of standing in lines.
And now, it's the fact that we're supposed to be able to have a longer time, and it's really shortening up our ability to spend more time on the island because now we're in this giant line to tender back.
I've never had to wait in line like this for a tender, never.
Well, we barely made our excursion, honestly. They said, we're glad you made it.
Walk off the ship and onto the dock. Yeah, that would be best.
I will now invite a lady to speak to you this evening, and this is someone who has been in the business for over 40 years. She is a pioneer in the industry, and she can speak to us from experience, from the experience of knowing what it is to earn her money to pay her bills, to as an entrepreneur, and hearing the cries of those visitors to her shore. This evening, I am pleased to allow up to speak to you, President of the Cayman Islands Independent Tour Bus Association, none other than Miss Jeremy Gold.
Good evening, Honorable Mr. McLaughlin and Deputy Premier, Mr. Colonel, and distinguished guests and my beautiful Bodden Town residents. I have been working in the tourism industry for the past 40 years, in which many of my family as well have worked in the tourism industry, and especially within the cruise industry. That is what I depend on my daily basis for my livelihood. And I'm asking all of you Bodden Towners who can vote in this district to please come out and support the cruise berthing facility. We need it. I've been working and I've got complaints day in and day out from tourists. It's asking the reason why we don't have a berthing facility. As you have seen, the presentation there, all of that is facts and truth. And we need a berthing facility on the island. Now, and further to enhance the Cayman Kind product, the Department of Tourism have given us 2 concierges to work in our booth. I don't know if you noticed the booth that was seen in the presentation, but they work day in and day out, and they have to be paid by the Cayman Islands Independent Tour Bus Association. We pay them a monthly salary. So our association plays a big role in the cruise industry. And that comes from the hospitality school. That is where these concierges came from. They were given to us by Mr. Moses Colonel and also Mr. Banks and Mr. Alden. I'm sure he had to approve of everything. And we have over 100 tour bus and taxi that operate from the cruise each day that is independent. Some of you might have seen us by the pavilion in the mornings, how much traffic that we have out there by the education department. That is where we operate from. That's where we're dispatched from. And we go down to the port. And the port is well needed. And I can tell anyone here tonight, I will be voting yes. And I don't care who like it or not. I'm in support, and I will support it to the last. And I will do whatever it takes, except anything with criminal activities, to support this. So, my name is Jeremy Gold, and thank you very much, Mr. Moses Colonel, Mr. Alden, and all the other distinguished guests, and all of the Bodden Towners for coming out, taking time out to come and support this evening. We need it, and God bless you all. Thank you.
When you hear it from the lips of those who depend on this to pay their bills, and definitely ambassadors of our islands, thank you, Ms. Jerme Gold. No stranger either to some of our airwaves, I now invite to the podium Ms. Paula Swaby. Some of you may know her as Brown Sugar, who is on behalf of the Taxi Association.
Good evening, Honorable Premier. Good evening, Deputy Premier. And I think that's Mr. Sullivan. I had a hard day, but I didn't forget. And good evening, my beautiful Caymanian residents. I have been working for the last 25 years in tourism, 15 years in cruise tourism. So now that season is starting, I work basically every other week, 7 days, because the cruise ships are coming in every other weekend. Now, I'm going to tell you a little story how our oceans has played an important part in our culture. So tonight, before I came here, and putting pen to paper, it kept repeating in my head, he had founded upon the seas. And very well true, it's in our crest. We were discovered by Christopher Columbus. These islands, we have had shipwrecks that has gained us a lot of fame, helped build our financial industry. Caymanians traveled on ships to faraway lands, national bulk carriers, yeah? We've even had keels drift ashore that inspired Caymanians to build cargo ships. I hate to call his name out, but Mr. Colonel family. And we've also had, shipbuilding in Georgetown, even East End too, there you go. And then if you go a little further, even if you go to one of the oldest Presbyterian churches, the Elmsman Memorial was built by the Arch family, shipbuilders, that if you walk through that church and look up in the roof, hull of a ship. So the ships have always been good to all of us. Now, we're going to come a little further ahead, and I'm going to take you back to 1970s. A great politician, I think his granddaughters may be even here tonight, Mr. Bert LaBush. He built that little pier that you see by the North Terminal. He lost his seat in Georgetown because of it. You know why? He was a man of vision. And what if he didn't do that? Yeah? So back then, ladies and gentlemen, we had a population, 15,000 people. Today, we have a population of about 65,000? 68, thank you. Oh. So, as the population grows, we need the necessary infrastructure to accommodate that. And the present cargo facilities, every day, I have to share cargo and cruise at the ports. If I not got containers, I've got heavy equipment. I've got trucks. Today, I have a boat on the pier too, just to let you know. Then I've got 100 taxi and tour operators. We can't park properly when we get down by Royal Watler because I got even construction equipment and the boat. Yes, that is on the pier now. That's in the way. Then I've got all the other cruise tour contractors parked. So we're all over the place. Then we got people complaining of the long lines, why they gotta wait in a room when they can't, come in ashore, why they just can't walk ashore. And then the port goes out of the way, they put up tents, benches, we got booths, we're doing everything to enhance the Caymankind tourism product while we're in the midst of chaos. So, today we had 6 ships. So ladies and gentlemen, I want you, that when you go to the polls, I want you to think about the 2015 Department of Environment. And they said, if we build the piers, the place with the less impact would be Georgetown. Now, when the ships come in and they drop an anchor, we lose coral. So, when I looked at all the plans for everyone in the, propose a berthing facility, this one is more environmentally friendly. Because think about it, ladies and gentlemen. If we're dropping anchors and mashing up coral, would we not want to relocate them? Yes? And if you look at everything that they have shown you, when the cruise ships come into house, they're coming in bow first. Yes? So the back end of the ship, where the propeller is, well, it got to be on when they're coming in, right? But it's on the drop-off. So if you have a pier that is not like what we have at the Royal Watler, because the Royal Watler is a big slab of concrete. So when you see on the buses and a cargo out there, we're sitting on water. Yes? And when we get those nice Christmas nor'westers, and the waves come in. Growing up here, I remember them going all the way down by the town clock. Yes? Yes, some people said post, by the post office. So that wall, like that wall there, like, right in the front, I find that it stops the waves, so they go no further than the sidewalk of Enhancement Memorial Church. So, ladies and gentlemen, the port has to be in Georgetown. The infrastructure is already there. It's very metropolitan. You have shops, restaurants, easy access to transport. So, ladies and gentlemen, when we go to this referendum, if the date don't change, even if it changes, we're still going. I want us Caymanians to go and exercise our democratic right. I want you to support our tourism. I want to support the Piers. I was with it always, and I'll be with it now. But I'm not going to jail for anybody. I thank you, and God bless you.
Thank you, Ms. Waby. I'll now ask you to direct your attention to the screen one more time, where we will play a Verdant Isle video. After that video, Mr. T.J. O'Sullivan will be doing his presentation in a PowerPoint style.
This project really is about, in many ways, changing the model from an old model that's been in place for decades, ships coming to a destination. This project is about modernization and creating an adequate facility that allows the arrival of those tourists to come in an efficient way. Grand Cayman is a pretty efficient airport, and it manages efficiently through design and experience. All of the aircraft coming in, debarking, embarking, customs, immigration, all the procedures necessary, and it does it in an efficient way on a relatively small footprint. Today, in the arrival of the cruise ships, the ships arrive and they anchor in various locations around Georgetown. Tenders coming out to the ships, a long process to debark. And that's the process that we've got in place today for the cruise ship tourists. And that's approximately 1.8 million people. 600,000 air guests coming into a state-of-the-art airport, 1.8 million cruise tourists coming into fundamentally a model that was created 100 years ago. The group called Verdant is basically 4 companies: Royal Caribbean Cruises Limited, Carnival Corporation, Orion, and McAlpine. 2 cruise companies and 2 companies very much involved in construction and building, particularly in the coastal marine environment.
We believe the development of the cruise port facility will provide for additional economic impact opportunities for Grand Cayman, one by the additional spend we believe that guests and crew will have by being alongside compared to tender operations. And 2, more importantly, we believe the direct economic impact by having additional cruise arrivals to Grand Cayman will be significant. Having an enhanced welcome center arrivals, having berthing alongside are key components that we believe provide us the capability and the interest that we have in working with Grand Cayman.
Today, the larger ships can't go to Grand Cayman. It's just simply not possible to manage the volume of tourists that are on the large ships. So it's really the nature of that product attracts a much more affluent customer, and we think that very much aligns with Grand Cayman itself.
The project was the idea to upgrade both the cruise facility and the cargo berthing in Georgetown, Grand Cayman. So we've been working with them to come up with the best design that basically increases the size of the cargo pier capacity, which is vitally important to the needs of the Cayman Islands. On the cruise side, in building 2 finger piers that are 4 berth Oasis capable, you are increasing the size of the ships that can come into Grand Cayman.
The consortium takes on entirely the risk of the project. We are designing it, building it, executing against this contract, and we're funding and financing it, and all of the funding and financing is the responsibility of the consortium. So there's effectively 0 risk, 0 responsibility to the government of Grand Cayman or the people of Grand Cayman.
You know, there's this whole conversation about it's going to cost people money. This is 100% financed by this consortium, and it's paid back through head tax collected by the cruise line.
I think we're all worried about the impact on the environment, and our intention is to replace 10 times the coral that we've removed to create the facility.
We brought in a specialized team that has worked in Grand Cayman named Polaris. They've done a lot of coral restoration, including in Grand Cayman. The Grand Cayman results are 89% success rate since they've started.
This is not a small project. It's going to take a number of months to move the corals. We have worked on several ship grounding cases here in Grand Cayman where we helped restore the reef. We feel like we're very qualified. We've worked on some really large projects, and we have skilled scientists, engineers, and frankly, artists, because it really involves all 3 of those aspects. It's not just a scientific endeavor. It's not an engineering endeavor. It's also an artistic endeavor. Our goal is to make a reef that looks like a reef, using all natural materials with healthy corals that lay people and even scientists after a period of time could not tell the difference. On this case, we've done this before. We've thought to go small and move reef sections individually with small boats to stay out of the port's way, have a number of boats working side by side, moving that over to the donor area. And then when we start moving corals over, our aim is to be out of the 10-acre dredge footprint area in about 6 months.
For this project, we will be working on coral relocation as the part where we're taking out the direct impacts from where the dredging and the pier will be constructed. And then the other aspect, because we do know that there will be some loss due to coral relocation, we have decided to use this microfragmenting technique to increase overall coral cover within Grand Cayman. And we think that that will increase it by 10 times.
We're working with a group led by Dr. Vaughan, who's been at the forefront of advancing the coral microfragmenting planting technology.
Grand Cayman has got a beautiful natural resource, and they know they want to share that with the world. To do so, we have to be able to help make sure the natural resources has all the help we can. And that is with technology. We have the technology now to put to good use in natural resource restoration. That's what this is. And we can make something beautiful. We have that technology. It'd be a shame to not apply it. Some of the biggest questions people had is, can we do this at scale? And so we looked to start a project that was plant 1 million corals. Not only is it basically a good idea, it's our mission, it's our vision, and as I like to say sometimes, it's the recipe. Not only do we make many pieces, but each piece grows back to size in record time, which is very unusual.
Our goal is no net loss on this project. We've engaged Dr. Vaughan to bring his research and knowledge to Grand Cayman. There's a lot of coral. We understand the impact to that, but our responsibility is to move that coral and to supplement that program with adding Dr. Vaughan's coral restoration process through microfragmentation.
What's great about the microfragmentation technique and some of the other coral reskinning things that we do is we're able to see this actively happen before our very eyes. We can see it happen in a matter of months with each coral that we cut and plant.
We'd like to work with the community down here in Grand Cayman. There's a lot of scientific expertise here. There's a lot of dive expertise here. We've worked with some of the members of the community in the past. We have relationships with them and are looking forward to doing that again. All the techniques are proven. The survival has happened, good survival. We've seen it right here in Grand Cayman. We can absolutely do it. It's just a matter of effort and a matter of doing it safely.
We look as an advantage of working for this project in the Cayman Islands is that there is a close partnership with the DOE and the government on making sure that this is a sustainable project. One of the first things we will do is get out and do what we're calling the coral gridding. We're basically just putting divers in the water, and we'll be really mapping out, almost pretty much by hand, all of the coral. The primary relocation area is approximately a little more than half a mile north of the project site. And there we'll be placing large boulders on the bottom as a foundation or a substrate for the corals to be attached to, so that we'll have new coral structures. Dredging the area of the port is not a contributor to the sand at 7 Mile Beach. 7 Mile Beach is what's known as a pocket beach, and essentially the sand there is somewhat self-contained. In the port itself, that area just is not a contributor of sediment to 7 Mile Beach.
There's a total commitment to make this a really great environmental success. We changed the way we're going to dredge the project. And initially we were looking at hydraulic dredging, but we changed the dredge process now to mechanical dredging. And we're going to have real-time sediment monitoring on the project.
It's important that the pier is on pilings and not a filled structure extending from shore to allow waves and currents to move through the structure as if it's not even there. Because it's on piles, the changes to the hydrodynamics should be relatively minimal.
We are undertaking everything we can within the framework of the port infrastructure and the guest and arrival welcome center. And we need to work very closely with the government of the Cayman Islands and the broader community to ensure that as these master plan enhancements for broader Grand Cayman and the road works and so forth are taken into account, and ensuring that we can continue to deliver that experience as the port arrivals may grow over time.
Our high season is the summer, from May through to October, and that's where we get higher paying customers and much higher yields. And it's extremely complementary with the Grand Cayman high season, which is in the winter. By allowing these ships to come into and berth in Grand Cayman, it effectively means that during the summer months, where today there's not a lot of tourists coming from the cruise ships, there will be more tourists coming from the cruise ships. Therefore, it's going to increase the number of tourists overall for the year, but on a daily basis, there will be no increase.
We believe that this provides a great enhancement to the arrivals experience for our guests and crew and allows us to continue to count on Grand Cayman well into the future as we explore and bring additional new large ships to this market.
That really is the essence of this project, and that's why we're hopeful that the proposal to move ahead with the cruise pier is approved.
So, yep. Good? Okay. So, my last name is O'Sullivan, traditional Irish name. My family immigrated to the United States in the late 1800s. Historically, in a Catholic family, an Irish Catholic family, the first son would run the family business, and the second son would go to become a priest. That was kind of how the tradition went. And my father entered the seminary in 1962 and studied in the seminary for 6 or 7 years. So I grew up watching my father as an adult minister. He didn't get his collar. He left, he met my mother, and ended up starting a family. And the legend in my family is that the first question he asked my mother was if he would marry her, and the second question was, I need to raise the kids in the church. So I watched, I learned how my father worked. It was talking to the people one-on-one, listening to them. So tonight, I'm just going to walk through the facts with you guys. That's all we're here to do, is present facts of this presentation, to present facts of this project, and just walk you through. There's been a lot of what I would say misinformation out in the market. I was at a private presentation last week to a business, and I had a younger gentleman tell me he had read on the internet that Royal Caribbean was not building any more Oasis-class ships. And I said, you know, that's a great fact that you read on the internet, but I work for the company and I have seen Oasis 5 with my own eyes. But no matter what I told him, the fact he read on the internet was much more of a truth to him than what I was presenting. So all we are doing today, and every day we've been here, this is my third one of these meetings, is presenting facts. You take the truth, you make your decision, and that's all we're here to do. So I'm going to run you guys through a PowerPoint if we can get it pulled up. PowerPoint? Oh, there we go. Okay, quickly. Mentioned in the video, 4 partners, Royal Caribbean, Carnival. That's over 80% of the cruise tourism by passengers, those two. We get a lot of questions of, how do you guys make sure that we're going to continue to grow? We control 80% of the business of the cruise market. We can bring the packs. We're financing the debt. We will make sure that this thing is paid for. We're going to make sure it's there. Orion, publicly traded company, great marine company. They built our pier for us in Labadee, Haiti. Tons of success around the world. We're very confident in what they do, and the team they put together. And McAlpine, local contractor, great guys. Helped you build the airport, been around for 40, 50 years on the island, if not more. What we're building, 2 finger piers, both Oasis capable, 4 berths, the big ships. You may or may not have seen an article in the news yesterday, and I use that term loosely because everybody can call themselves news, but when they're presenting opinion, it's not fact. There was an article yesterday that came out that said, gotcha. Gotcha journalism. We got you guys, Royal. 2011, you did a study and said you could bring Oasis capable here. Joey, how many Oasis capable ships have we brought to Grand Cayman? 0. 8 years. Theoretically, it's possible. I can unload a ship of 10,000 people, but practically, we cannot do it. It takes 4 hours to disembark 6,000 people. 4 hours. How much time do we have in here on port on any given day? 8 hours, 9 hours? If it takes me 4 hours to get 6,000 people off the ship, how long does it take me to turn them around and get them back on? The day is gone. We looked at it every which way. Why? Because Royal Caribbean and the industry and the people love Grand Cayman. We want to bring our best guests here. We want to bring our biggest ships here, but we can't. It's not that we don't want to, that we're forcing people to build this pier. It's not that. We're paying for it. We are putting the money up front. We want to do this together. Peter was brought in from England. Public-private partnerships. This is together. There's an expression in Spanish that says, todo en la cama, todo en el piso. All in the bed together or all on the floor together. We're going to do this together. Build the pier. We're going to help you upgrade the cargo facility, almost double the capacity. You saw the video with Will talking about how much need there is. It cannot operate the way it is today. It's still operating off the same infrastructure from 1977 with minor upgrades. The cruise passenger head tax will pay that back. If not, it's going to be a large public works. And if you have a vote no, then somebody's going to have to make that decision of how you're going to pay for that, how you're going to make that cargo pier happen. We're going to upgrade the tender facility. There will still be a need for tenders. There's still going to be days when there's more ships out there than 4. The Port Authority will control all of this and make the determination. And one of the most important pieces of the puzzle you saw in the video, you heard Paula talk about it earlier, we're going to upgrade the arrivals. I'll show you some pictures of that, what we're going to do with everybody around. Here you can see a quick overview. We showed it in the video. Much larger cargo facility, distribution for buses, distribution for taxis, and the ability to walk on and off the pier. I have conversations all the time with people who say, if you build the pier, all your guests are going to walk back on the shore and eat lunch. It's a possibility. It's a truth. It's a reality. People want that food. But at the same time, they're going to leave the ship again. I can guarantee you, and I can show you numbers, we track every single person that goes on and off our ships. More people leave when we have a pier, and more people leave multiple times. I tell people I went on a cruise in September. I have a 1-year-old. In the morning, we went to the beach. We did a tour in the morning. Daughter needed a nap. Took her back. Lunchtime, my wife and I switched off, grabbed lunch. And when she woke up, we went back out in the port and went shopping. That would not happen with a tender pier. That's not made up facts. That's not my opinion. That is the truth of the reality of the industry. Overview of what we're going to do out on the front side. And much more matching to what you guys have here. When people ask me, my friends, I grew up in North Carolina in a small town. When people ask me, I want to go on vacation in the Caribbean, they say, where should I go? I say, my 2 favorite places in the Caribbean are Cayman and Jamaica. Totally different, but my 2 favorite places. Cayman is the nicest, it's the cleanest, the hospitable people. Jamaica I like, it's got that rough edge, good food, music vibe. Totally different, but that's where I tell everybody to go. Your cruise product now does not match what you offer. It's not a reflection of who you are. You saw the video of the people lining up for the tenders. It's sweaty, there's no shade, there's not a real positive shopping experience. You've got taxis dispatched in the cargo area. There are places in this world where we still have to dock our vessels in a cargo pier. We'll do it if we have to, but we hate the experience for our guests. We are doing this. Why are we involved? To improve our guest experience. We sell vacations. We are in the cruise line business. We build ships. We will support the infrastructure when we see a need for that, because we are trying to deliver the best vacations to our guests. Heard a couple times in the video, there's no financial risk. Royal and Carnival will be signing the documents with the bank. When most of these deals happen, you need to give up one of 3 things as a government. We do these deals all around the globe. You either got to sign on the guarantee as a government, you've got to give up a large portion of your annual revenues, or you've got to give up control of your port. In this deal, the Cayman Islands has negotiated and been able to keep all three of those. No guarantees by the government, revenues stay flat, and they control the port. It's the best deal I have ever seen in the history of the industry. They'll be paid back through cruise passenger guests, maintenance and insurance. I read an article in the Compass today, and one big piece was missing. Insurance. Anybody guess how much insurance costs for a $250 million pier for 25 years? $63 million. More than $2 million a year. Not calculated in that equation. Insurance, $80 million to $100 million that we will be maintaining the pier over the 25 years. Basically, we've got to return the pier back to the people of Cayman Islands in the status we found it. We need to keep that pier up and running for safety, for our guests. We'll be there to maintain it every day. And at the end, we'll be handing over an asset that we paid $250 million for today, US, which in 25 years at index growth is more than $400 million valued. An asset turned back over. Control of the port remains with the Port Authority. Cruise lines, Bodden Isle, nobody will be involved with that. Determination of when the ships come, what time they arrive. Question we get a lot is, if Royal and Carnival are part of Bodden Isles, will the other guys still come? So, throughout this process, as government's been doing their diligence in making sure that this deal was going to work, they went out to the major cruise lines and said, if you guys are willing to provide funding to the winning bidder, we will provide you something called berthing preference. Berthing preference is very common in the industry. It's basically the right of first refusal to call on a berth. There's 28 berths a week. Royal has right of 11, Carnival has right of 11, MSC has the right of 3, and Disney has the right of 3. So everybody will still continue to come here. And that doesn't mean that NCL won't be able to call. You will see NCL ships out those berths. It just means that the right of first refusal are divvied between those 4 brands. And that was based on those brands willing to fund the winning bidder. They were willing to provide the money if they called on it, and that was what we got for berthing preference. Picture of the retail, upgraded, matching the high-end product that you guys have here on the island. It will be managed by the Port Authority. No upland development by the cruise lines. All rent will be collected by the Port Authority. Another view of the cargo berth. 3, you have a row up here on front, roll on, roll off. The ability to handle a large amount of cargo in a much safer manner than is out there today. This is one of the most important slides that we have. In April of 2017, I began working on this project. We had a group of members of the Cayman Islands government fly to Miami. They met with Royal, they met with Carnival, they met with NCL, they met with MSC, they met with Disney. And they said, this is initial designs that we have for a cruise berth. And what you can see there is the outline in red. This is what was submitted in the 2015 EIA. All the red here was dredging. So, over the last 2.5 years, through this negotiation process, and Royal and Carnival and Bodden Isle have been working with Schneider Engineering, one of the best design firms in the world related to marine. When Carnival came on board our team and joined us, their one condition was we have to use Schneider Engineering because they're the best. We won't handle anything different. So what we did in discussions and looking at it 7 ways to Sunday is we tried to reduce the impact to the dredging pocket as much as possible. And we totally eliminated the dredging need for Hogstye Bay. We were able to increase cargo through a different design. The old one was coming out this way. We were able to do a unique design that allows us more berthing space for the cargo. We also took the piers farther out to deeper water to reduce the impact. We're currently working on the scoping document for the update to the EIA. what it's looking at, and Peter can probably touch on this better a little bit later, it's a 30% reduction on the initial from the 2015 EIA. With less ships anchoring and more at call, you will have a better development and the ability to regrow coral out in the middle where the current anchoring area is. This is an additional benefit. It wasn't contemplated in the initial scoping, but one of the things that our team who has gone down there and looked said this is going to be a consequence that we weren't planning for, a positive consequence. We have put together the best team that has ever done a project like this. We searched high and low. We brought in a world-class team, environmental team, to make sure, because we understand there are a lot of concerns around the environmental impact. And we've gone out there and we've brought together one of the best teams that we could possibly do. It was mentioned in the video, we brought on Dr. Vaughn, coral restoration expert. Silt is going to be minimal. That term is thrown around a lot. Silt is normally in an area where there's river, like in Belize. But there will be some silting when we do the dredging. But we're going to have the ability to monitor that online and through with the DOE. We're also putting together an independent environmental oversight committee. The idea is that we put 3 people who are considered world-class in their fields to work at arm's length and oversee the project and make sure that no decisions are made that would affect the environment negatively. Mitigating the risk as much as possible is what we're trying to do. Here's the team we have. Polaris, who's been successful relocating coral here on the island. Plant a Million Corals is Dr. Vaughn and the other 2. Here's just some of the work that Polaris has done. They've been doing coral restoration for more than 14 years, and they've had 2 projects here in the Cayman Islands. They've had success here. 89% is what they saw off the Paul Allen wreck, but they have it all around the world. Here's a couple of the other projects I work at, 80%. And what we're going to do, and you saw it quickly in the video, is we're going to supplement that all with Dr. Vaughn. What has been known for years is that you can break and regrow elkhorn and staghorn coral. You see videos of this. It's been going on for years. Some years ago, Dr. Vaughn discovered that you could do this microfragmenting with all 29 species of coral here in the Caribbean. He was working with Moat Research Lab in the Keys. From there, he retired from Moat and set up his own business. We searched him out. How do we make this project better? If you think about the design that we had, we were always striving to do better. What can we do to make this the best project that's ever happened? So we found Dr. Vaughn. We visited his facility. We are very confident in his ability to improve what we move. What he'll do is that when the corals are relocated, there will be pieces of the coral that do break off. We understand that. But he has the ability to grow those corals in a much more accelerated time period than can be done naturally. The corals grow together and increase the coverage on the old coral heads. Here's a picture of one of the projects he worked on in Cancun, destroyed by a storm. One of the things that we continue to discuss with people is that coral is attacked many different ways. Storms, changes in biology, in the ecosystem. But he has the ability, through his process, to grow and redevelop this coral. I touched on an earlier silt management program, and Gary touched on it in the video. We're going to use mechanical excavation instead of the previous suction dredging. No offshore disposal. It's all going to be used in the land reclamation that's going to turn into the cargo area and the taxi dispatch area. We're going to use all the material that's pulled out. Question we hear a lot, will this affect 7 Mile Beach? The 2015 EIA, and if you have questions about that, we brought Dave Englund from Baird with us. He was the one that actually drafted the 2015 EIA, his firm. They looked at all the historical information, did their own tests. There was no impact to 7 Mile Beach. It was mentioned in the video, it's a pocket beach. The sand does not come from the Georgetown area. It will not affect 7 Mile Beach. One of the things that we've heard, that people have asked, I used to think myself, was that a pier was a concrete slab that went into the ground. On smaller docks, you will see that. Sometimes people will build a brick walkway out into the water. That does affect the movement of sand and such. But because these are up on pilings, it allows the free movement of water and fish and marine life. It's about 10 feet up in the air from the sea level up to the bottom of the piers, which allows for the movement and flow of water and allows for some sea level rise if that were to happen over the next 50 years. Here's an overview looking at it from the other direction. You can see all of the dispatch area, which will allow us to move tourists, allow us to increase tour efficiency. One of the things, if we have a pier, is you can turn a lot more tours. Some ports we go to, we can have 3 tours a day. In Cayman currently, you're lucky if you get 2. It's easy to get 2 with a pier. One of the questions, I had a discussion with Paula 2 months ago or so. On average, in a port, we have about 40% participation rate in tours. Our guests, on average, will take a tour 40% of the people or so. In a port like Cayman Islands, we have over 95%, similar ports with a dock, over 95% of our guests will leave the ship. So that's 55% of our passengers who are looking to do something else. 60% of people will take 1 tour during their itinerary, usually 3 nights. So they'll go to a tour on one of those 3, and the other places they're just looking for something to do. Sometimes they'll stop by the taxi booth and say, where's the best beach? Take me to the caves, take me to this, take me to that. Provides a lot more flexibility to what you can provide in the tour product. It also allows us to arrive earlier and leave later. From here, we can get to Cancun overnight, we can get to, Cozumel, we can get to Jamaica overnight, we can get to Roatan overnight. We can stay later in the evenings if the tour product matches, if you provide something that the guests want to do later on the evening. That's totally up to the people, what the island can provide. We are not tour operators. We are not in destination tours. We rely on the experts and the partnerships we have in the local jurisdictions to show our people what there is. We're always looking for new and creative ideas for tour products. There's always different ideas you can come up with. We are always open to hearing those ideas. And there's also additional benefits if you're just a small business owner or a business owner in the area. What's something I can provide more to tour guests? To cruise guests. Doesn't always have to be tours. We talk about that because we understand there will be a growth in jobs. Currently, I asked my product team, if the referendum goes through, she said, I need at least 10 new tour operators. I need 25 new tours at a minimum. Because Royal Caribbean will be the largest growth of guests if this product goes through. Royal Caribbean will go from currently about 400,000 passengers to around 900,000. The largest single grower will be Royal because we cannot bring the Oasis class ship here. That is where the growth potential is opening it up to the larger ports, to the larger ships. Carnival has a new vessel coming out called Excel. They will not be bringing Excel class here because of the number of passengers. They will not be able to tender it. But if the pier is built and the people decide they want to go forward with it, both Oasis class and Excel class will be able to call here. Talked about growth. That's where that growth is mainly going to be driven from the larger ships. The Port Authority remains the final say in when the ships come. So the determination of the growth will be made on the Port Authority. I talked about this earlier, but that new distribution center will allow us to improve visitor traffic flow. One of the big ones to this region, more tourist destination experience. How do we get people away from the 7 Mile Beach area? How do we take people to see the other parts of the island? You need more time in port. How do we get more time in port? You build a pier. Because if you saw in that video, the comments of the guest, and this was not a unique comment, she said, as soon as I got off, I had to almost get up and start lining up to go back. People are really afraid of missing a tender to go back. They want to know that they can get back on the ship. Because what happens if you miss the ship? You've got to figure out how to get home. That is truth. You've got to figure out, A, if you're going to go to the next port or you're just going to go back home. You're in charge of that. I've said it a couple times, but for those of you who have hearing us for the first time, a captain once explained it to me as, TJ, how long in advance do you get to the airport before the international flight? I say 2 to 3 hours. Get through security, make sure there's no long lines, get something to eat. He said, have you ever taken a train? I said, once or twice. He said, what time do you get to the train station? 5 minutes beforehand. Because you know that train is not leaving until 12 o'clock, until 6 p.m. You don't have to go through security, you just get back on. Very similar when you go to a pier. The security is done on board. You're not waiting on another piece of the puzzle to complete your vacation or your trip. You control your destiny. You can stay till that last minute, buying one more thing, having one more drink. Not possible today. Because people are thinking, I've got to wait. Oh, I saw that big line when we got off. I've got to go ahead and go back. This was touched on in the video also. Oasis class vessels are our highest paying guests. And the Oasis class guests are not coming here currently. Independent study done by Berea shows that a pier to Cayman Islands will bring a $100 million economic impact through crew and guest spending. Based on current numbers, based on the growth projected, $100 million additional into the economy. Another question that's come up, if the referendum goes positively for the pier, do you guys start digging the next day? Does the construction team start? This just outlines there's a total process in place that we've got to go through. Everything's got to be approved, all permits signed off on. There are many additional steps that have to go forward to make sure everything is done. All the I's, all the T's crossed, that we're going forward in a way that means that we're going to do the job correctly. We think and feel, and I mentioned this earlier, that no deal has been done like this before in the history of the cruise industry. It's a win-win partnership. We want to bring our guests to Cayman Islands. We have provided and discussed for over 2.5 years, negotiated a deal that brings benefit to the people of the Cayman Islands with no risk. All the risk, all the insurance, all the maintenance falls on Virgin Isles. People say you can't get anything for free. We are putting up the money because we want to bring our guests here. The Cayman Islands is an important destination for us. For Royal Caribbean, we're going to have an Oasis-class ship in Galveston. We want this to be the premier port for the destination. We want to bring those guests. With Cayman Islands, we can create a 4-port itinerary from Miami. Miami, Coco Cay, Labadee, Cayman, Jamaica, Roatan, Cozumel, a combo of those, we can create a 4-port itinerary with Cayman. So it's a benefit for us. Cayman always scores one of the highest in the Caribbean for appeal and satisfaction. Appeal is how our guests rate a destination that they want to go to, and satisfaction is how it resulted, how it came out to them. The comments that we see related to Cayman Islands that affect us and why we're willing to invest in this is related to the tender. There is not a port in the world of this size with this number of passengers that still uses tender. I saw a comment that somebody forwarded to me on Facebook that was talking about all these other ports that still tender. One of them was Belize. You know how many guests from Royal Caribbean go to Belize? Less than 100,000. There was a couple other smaller ports, but there was nothing of the size of the number of passengers you guys have that doesn't have a pier. It's really what we need to improve the guest experience, and that's why we're investing in it. Because the guest vacation is the business we are in. We're not in the pier business. We're not trying to make a ton of money off of the pier. We just want to do this to improve our guest experience, because we sell vacations. And most of our guests who go on one cruise, they go on a second cruise. Most people who come to an island and see it on a cruise, they want to come back, and they want to see it longer. All of our data shows that. There's economic growth opportunities, there's entrepreneur growth opportunities, there's job opportunities. We see this as a win-win for everybody. If you guys have questions, please pass the papers around. We'll be glad to answer questions with truth and facts, is all we're here to do. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, TJ. Now it's time for the question and answer segment, and I ask that if you have any follow-up questions, that you please raise your hand so that you can be given a piece of paper so that we can get as much of these questions. We intend to get all of them out tonight. First question. Some of my family have already voted by postal ballot. Many others will have as well. How will this legal action by CPR National Trust affect their democratic rights?
Thank you, Sabrina. Good evening, everyone. Again, I'm not sure I'm qualified to answer this question, but I'll try. Just working on the basis of logic, if the referendum is deferred, I think the ballots will just be kept safely by the supervisor of elections until a new date is set for the referendum. As I say, I'm not sure I'm entirely qualified to answer that because I'm not involved with the elections office, but just working on the basis of logic, that's what I think.
Thank you. Has the government really spent $9 million on booklets and flyers and ads to fight against CPR? If not, what was the $9 million spent on?
Nowhere near that. This is a project that's been worked on now for almost 6 years. Again, I don't think I'm the one best qualified to answer this. Perhaps Peter can deal with these. He is the Chief Project Officer in the Public Works Department.
So to answer the question, as the Premier said, this project goes all the way back to 2013. The first part of that was doing a scoping exercise on the project, looking at the different sites, and obviously moving on to the EIA. We then moved on to further design to enhance the environmental impacts and 2 years of procurement. And if you think of it in round terms, $9 million sounds like a lot, but it's only 4.5% of the construction price. You go today to hire a team to build a house, build an office, etc. It's going to cost you 10-15% in fees. So it's not unusual for a job of this size to have that kind of field. The other thing I'll mention is lawyers, and I'll leave it at that.
I think you may have to stay there.
Lawyers and accountants, we had to first make a business case to the United Kingdom government. When we took office in 2013, the Cayman Islands government was not able to produce its own or pass its own budget without approval from the UK because we were in breach of various provisions of the public management and finance law with respect to ratios and so forth. We weren't able to borrow money, so we had to come up with a scheme which allowed us to proceed with the project without having to borrow money. And everything that we did had to have the oversight of the UK government. So we've spent a lot of money on business cases and hiring accounting and auditing firms and lawyers and technical experts and engineers and environmental experts, and we're still paying for a lot of that. So what's been spent and is being spent on promoting the government project is a fraction of the overall cost of the project so far.
Thank you. What is an EIA? How long does it take? How much does it cost? And who will pay for it if we had to do another one?
My name is Dave Anglin. I work with Baird & Associates. We're a consulting company. I'm based in Ottawa, Canada. We did the environmental impact assessment study for this project in 2014-15, and I was the project manager for that study. So that work was done over the course of somewhat more than a year. I think it was maybe a year and a half by the time it was said and done, and I think the total fees were in the order of $2 million Cayman, I think. So that was the process at that point. We've done that. Where we sit now is a project that is, it's the same project with some of the details have changed. So where we sit right now in the process, maybe this wasn't the question, but just to sort of put it out there, is we Baird are working on what we've called an EIA scoping update. So we're looking at the project as it is proposed now versus what we assessed in 2015, and comparing it and looking at how the environmental impacts may change because of changes in the project and new information that may have come to light over the last 4 years. So we're in the midst of that process right now. So it's really assessing what we think are the changes and impacts and determining what needs to happen to better quantify the impacts should the referendum be positive and the project proceeds. So what I could say in terms of that process right now, the report that we're working on will be issued in early December, will be submitted to the Department of Environment for review. Right now, what I can say is that the current project is, in the context of environmental impacts, is similar to or better than what we looked at 4 years ago. So some impacts remain effectively unchanged. Some of them the impacts are less, so there are less negative impacts with this project, and that is not a surprise to me at all, because for the last 4 years, the entire focus of effort of consultants led by the government has been to reduce impacts. So there's no surprise that the impacts are less. So that's maybe a little more answer than the question, but that's where we sit.
How much does it cost, and who will pay for it if we have to do another one?
I don't know that we have an answer to that question at this point, so we're looking at the changes and impacts, or our opinion about them. That will be submitted to the DOE. The DOE will then work with Bodden and with the Ministry of Tourism to define the path ahead and the scope of work that needs to be done to support the project moving ahead. And that is likely to be the development of environmental management plans, finalization of the coral management, coral relocation plan, the dredge management plan. So all these activities, plans, and procedures that will be put in place to support the project should go ahead and to minimize the impacts.
Okay, thank you. I'm not worried about the dock. What I need to know, would there be a breakwater in the making? Who is Mario Rankin and Moxham? Have they been anywhere in the world on large ships?
Well, I don't know if we want to deal with the second part of the question, but I think we'll deal with the first, about the question about whether or not the project involves the building of a breakwater, I think is what it says, a wave wall or whatever we call these things.
So I'm actually, my first line of expertise is as a breakwater designer. That's what I grew up doing, so I know what a breakwater is. This project does not include a breakwater. A breakwater is built to provide sheltered water for ports. So this project does not have a breakwater as part of it. The piers, as we saw in some of the graphics earlier, it's called an open construction. So it's a series of piles that the deck is supported on. So it really has no influence on, or very little influence on waves and currents. So it's an open structure. So the construction of the land reclamation area creates new land. It's not really a breakwater, but it certainly has some impact on the waves. I don't really understand the context of the question, but there is no breakwater as part of this project.
Second question? No? What are the consequences for Caymanians if this port is not built and there are significantly less cruise visitors? If less goods and services are sold, won't this reduce the income government makes?
The cruise industry itself provides 20% of our tourism product. The tourism product provides about 35% of our gross domestic product. And when you look at a product mix of something that you sell, you want to maximize the revenue and maximize the sale based on adjusting to your market. We don't have another product right now to take the place of cruise. We set a government policy because the Caribbean is the most popular cruise region in the world, and we wanted to take advantage of the opportunity that was here because of the growth in the industry itself, and we wanted to participate in that growth in a best manner possible. So the question of if we don't continue to grow our cruise business, if we don't continue to keep up with the industry itself, the PwC report clearly said that because of the movement to larger ships, their cruise passenger arrival would start to fall away. And the PwC report said it could fall all the way down to 1 million passengers. So if we lose 45% of our cruise business, we have to understand how we replace that. At this point in time, we don't have another mix. And the other part of it is that the way the project itself and the opportunities designed is that in the same way that we took stayover visitation and turned it into a yearly business, we want to take cruise business and turn it into a yearly business, which means that there'll be no more people here on a daily basis, so there will be no more worry of carrying capacity. So the island now will receive no more guests than it does now on a daily basis, but it will receive them all through the year when businesses are slow and they have to understand, what do you do when you have a key employee and you only have business for 8 months out of the year? You can't release them, so you have to understand how you're going to fund your business for 12 months. The government's responsibility is to create opportunity. We looked at it from the standpoint of trying to strengthen the businesses that were involved in cruise because more Caymanians work in that sector of tourism, and we believe we have a very successful project that we're rolling out for the country.
I have heard people say, I am in favor of a port. We need it, but I am scared of environmental effects. Can you give us your thoughts on how you could reassure these people the impact has been overstated?
When we did the environmental impact assessment 4 years ago, we had a scope for the project, but we didn't know how it would be built. There are different ways one can build a project like this. So in the environmental impact assessment study, we had to make some assumptions about how it might be built, and we had to consider different ways how it might be built. And for example, and it was mentioned earlier today with the dredging, which is maybe one of the chief concerns, is there are hydraulic methods to dredge and mechanical methods to dredge. So at the time we did the EIA, we considered both. Now that Verdon's come to the table and has thought through the project and figured out how they're going to do it, they're going to use a mechanical approach. So what I can say is that the approach that Verdon will use is the least impactful of the approaches that we considered in the environmental impact assessment study. So we had, I think, 3 different scenarios. This, what's been proposed, is the least impactful of those 3. The other concern that was raised in the environmental impact assessment study was cruise ship traffic and the props and thrusters generating suspended sediment, turbidity plumes, and potentially smothering corals. So we did some computer modeling of that as part of the environmental impact assessment, and we identified the potential for that to happen. But it's a very, very complicated process with many variables, and the model is just an estimate. And what we looked at, and this is described in the EIA as well, is there are some animations out there that show plumes, and we produce those, and there's a potential for those. But when we actually looked at the real world experience, practical experience, we did a literature search for projects like this where there are problems. And we found 3 specific projects around the world where sediment resuspension by cruise ships is a documented problem. Key West, Bermuda, and Venice. And in all 3 of those cases, those are facilities that are located in sheltered water where the sediment on the bottom is very fine, and they have long dredged approach channels with bends, and a bend requires a ship to use a lot of power to turn. So all of those conditions do not exist here. Here you're in exposed water, there aren't any fines, very few fines on the seabed. You don't have a long approach channel. So we think actually that what's shown in the EIA is probably sort of a worst case. We don't think that's going to happen. If the dredging, when the material here is dredged, and particularly when you're dredging in rock, you may leave some fines behind. So it's possible when the project first becomes operational, there may be some of those turbidity plumes, but that material will disperse very quickly through waves and through ship traffic, and we don't think it'll be an ongoing problem. The last, I suppose, key question would be the coral impacts on corals. So no doubt the project will have an impact on coral, and the team is trying to minimize and mitigate those impacts, first through project design, where the project footprint has been modified to reduce the impact on corals, the coral relocation plan, and then finally this Dr. Vaughan stuff with the coral rescue triage nursery, which is attempting to actually put back more than is lost through the project.
Thank you. If CPR really wanted to represent the people's democratic right, why are they trying to stop the referendum?
It's a question that I ask myself repeatedly. It reminds me of the story about the dog that used to keep chasing the car every morning, barking, and then one morning the car stopped. And all the dog was able to do was to walk around the car and lift his rear leg on the tire and walk off. So be careful what you ask for, you just might get it. They petitioned for a referendum. They got the number of signatures necessary. The government has fixed the date for the referendum. The full election machinery is in train, and we have a date set. And now they don't want it. I don't know. I really don't know.
Will the increased cargo facility lower our cost of living? Can you explain this a bit?
What it'll do is put us in a position to control the price of goods as they come over the cargo facility, two things will happen. Number one, the cruise berthing facility gives us economic income and a positive growth forward. The cargo, where we are right now with cargo is, as you heard from the video presentation, the cargo port itself can no longer operate efficiently. And what that means is that when a ship comes in and it discharges containers, they don't flow off the dock in a manner that is the most efficient. What happens is they have to stop and they have to clear the dock because they don't have enough space for the containers themselves to sit on the dock. So that's a higher cost of doing business, which obviously affects the bottom line of the Port Authority. The second part of it is that with the aggregate ships that come, a lot of times the aggregate can't get to the dock. They have to stay in the stream, as we call it. So when you stay in the stream, you start incurring demurrage, which means that the aggregate is more expensive for the goods to come ashore and to be used in our economy, which means a higher price. So, number one, right now, the inefficiency of the port, and with the growth that we're having, it will continue to become more inefficient, which means it'll cost more for goods to go over. The other part that has been talked about is the opportunity for having more commercial activity on a regional basis at the port. And that there's a couple of examples of that. One is if you had more space, there is a real conversation about containers being brought here from Miami and then transshipped onto another port, basically Roatan or Honduras. So those are opportunities for growing a business that reduces the cost and gives you economy of scale that the Port Authority cannot participate in now because it is simply getting small for the job that it has to do for the country.
If the port is built, can the Pier withstand a northwester, or do we still need to take passengers to Spots Dock?
That's an issue that we looked at as part of the EIA as well. So we call it downtime. So when you have weather, inclement weather that means the ships can't call or can't unload, then we call it downtime. And they could either go around a spot or they could skip altogether. With the Pier, the downtime will be less. So the ships are more resistant to wave action than the tender operation is. So there will be less downtime with the Pier, but there still will be occasions when ships can't berth. We've looked at that, the downtime percentages. It's in the environmental impact assessment report. I don't remember the numbers, but it's much less with the ships than it is with the tender.
And just a quick follow-up on that, a real-time data point that Royal Caribbean has recently gone through. We just completed a pier at Coco Cay on our private island in the Bahamas. Before the pier was built, we had about a 12% cancellation rate. The location of that island creates a lot of wind, and especially during this time of year, similar to the island here. Before the pier was built, we had to cancel about 12% of our calls to Coco Cay. Since the pier has been built, we're canceling less than 2% of the calls. That is just a factor of the ability of our captains to dock the ships. We brought one of our captains down here last week to meet with the seafarers, and he told me that he can park a ship of that size in 25-knot wind with his arm tied behind his back. The technology and the ability to control those ships is second to none. It's world-class. The modern technology on it is something that is a marvel in engineering. So what does that mean? Is that there will be a lot less calls and spots will basically become obsolete for the industry.
Which department grants the wildlife interaction zone permits, and how many have been granted in recent years? Which department grants the wildlife interaction zone permits, and how many have been granted in recent years?
Thank you for the question. We have granted a little bit over 200 licenses in the last 3 years. But when I say we, these licenses are granted by the Department of the Environment. Yesterday in Finance Committee, when we were looking into the budget for the new Coast Guard, one of the questions and one of the answers which confirmed, and I'm a little premature because the Premier is going to make this announcement, maybe tomorrow, that the Coast Guard is now going to take the responsibility for patrolling Stingray City and take the responsibility for whiz licenses, and we're going to take the control of Stingray City back, and we're going to look at putting a moratorium on the license issues being issued until we can understand exactly what the capacity of Stingray City is and how it can benefit and maximize the benefit for the people who depend on it for a living.
Is Guy Harvey speaking against the port because of his partnership with Norwegian Cruise, since they are not in Verdant Isle?
I don't think that's a question that we can answer. He's a man of integrity. He's an honorable man that does a great deal of work for his environmental beliefs. So he's very much respected in his industry, and he's certainly open to have his own opinions.
What is going to happen to the cruise tourists while the expansion project is going on? Will the ship dock somewhere else in the meantime?
So as part of the discussions that have been going on for the last 2 years, one of the things that our construction team had to put together, and one of the requirements as part of the submission, was a phasing plan as to not affect the cargo or cruise port during construction. So basically there will be some shifting going on, working with the tender operators and making sure that there is no interruptions to cruise or cargo business during the time period. There has been one discussion throughout that the guidance from the Port Authority, who will continue to control and make the determination about the ships that come in, is that during construction they would prefer not to have a 6-ship day, and that there will be hopefully an idea to work with the different cruise lines and their deployments to say if somebody needs to be shifted around. But what I was told throughout the process is that 6-ship days, which we actually had today, only happens 8 times a year.
How many cruise ships will be able to dock at the same time as the cargo ship in the port?
4 Oasis-class ships.
How much less dredging will be done in the proposed project compared to other islands?
So every project is unique and requires looking at it at the scope of the project individually. I was presented a project recently in another destination with over 1 million cubic meters of dredging needed to do the project. Here is a much smaller footprint, as you can see from the design capabilities. The dredging here will only take a couple months. Sometimes it takes a couple years. The scope here is a smaller footprint than a normal, what I would call a normal project. So it's much smaller than you would see in a, what I would say, a more common, typical project.
Where have your experts successfully relocated coral? Where have your experts?
So we can bring the slide back up. They've had some work in Grand Cayman. They've had some work in the Middle East, throughout Florida, Mexico. I think there are many different locations, Hawaii, that they have shown their successful projects. One thing that we are aware here is the size and the scope of the project. We understand that it is a little bit larger than some of these previous projects that have been done, but the methodology is all the same. It's the idea of, can I cut my mom's lawn, who's half the size of mine, versus my neighbor's lawn that's 4 times the size. It's a scalability of a project. I understand how to do it. I know what I can do in my skill set and who I need to assist and make that project go better, but I can take it to a much larger level. And that's why we're confident with the world-class team we've put together to accomplish this goal.
Is the water going to stay clear? Is it going to damage the reef?
The coral relocation plan and the dredge management plan are the key sort of tools we have to minimize those risks. So before any dredging happens, there'll be a lot of studies done to quantify what we expect to be, say, the dredge plumes when the dredge is working. Now, as I mentioned earlier, because we're using a mechanical dredging approach, because the dredging is less than was considered in the EIA, those impacts will be less than we looked at in the EIA. There will still be turbidity plumes generated by dredging, but we have the contractor will use what's called real-time monitoring, so there will be instruments in the water to measure turbidity, and they can adaptively manage the dredging work. So the dredge that they're using, a mechanical dredge, is relatively nimble, so they can slow it down, or they can move it, or they can stop it if they have to. So in any event, that capability will be considered in the modeling that we'll do of the plumes. The coral relocation plan will be designed to move the corals that are within the direct impact zone, so where the dredging actually takes place, and within anywhere where we think the turbidity may be such that it would kill the coral. So corals within the direct impact zone where we're dredging, and the high impact indirect zone where we think we'll have a lot of turbidity, those corals will be moved as part of the coral relocation plan. And then when the dredging takes place, we'll have the real-time monitoring and the adaptive management to control the dredging, to limit the turbidity so that there aren't more corals that are subjected to stress and potential harm. That's the answer to that question.
Thank you. You want to increase tourism numbers, but when are the eastern districts going to get roads to accommodate current traffic, much less increased traffic?
Well, thank you very much for the question and an opportunity to talk a little bit about what we are trying to do. In that regard, we have a transportation plan currently on the way to improve the number or increase the number of lanes of traffic into Georgetown. You'll see some of that work on the way on the east-west bypass now. We are planning very early in the new year, assuming, and I think we will get the approval of the National Conservation Council to immediately start extending the east-west arterial from Hearst, its junction with Hearst Road, or Newlands Road, whatever you want to call it, through to Woodland Acres. And then once we get the approval of the National Conservation Council, because some environmental impact assessments have to be done, to continue that from there through to northward, and from northward to Lookout, Bodden Town. In Georgetown itself, in the Red Bay area where I live, we are increasing the lanes to 3 into town with a dedicated one to South Sound, and working to relieve what I call the pinch point there by the roundabout, Grand Harbor roundabout. We are also proceeding to extend the Linford Pearson Highway, which I think we are on the way to resolving the issue about how we get the road extended around the horse stables that are there, and then to create 2 more lanes all the way down Bobby Thompson Way, so that we will have 4 lanes all the way from Savannah to Bottom New West Bay. So that is in conjunction with the work that we're doing to allow traffic to essentially bypass the Harbor Drive in that area. Much of that work has already been done, creating those other secondary roads. But in the longer term, we all understand very well, those of us in government, that we just can't keep adding cars and more cars and more cars, because the Cayman is small, very small, and the population is growing incredibly quickly, in addition to the tourists that we welcome here every year. So we have to create an additional transportation system so that people have options other than getting in a car to get wherever it is they're going. So we are commissioning a study now to allow that work to start to be done on planning for how we provide transportation, modern, comfortable, convenient, reliable transportation for our populace into the future. Because the point is going to come, and I think come very quickly, when we have to start limiting the number of vehicles that are allowed here. There's just no other way around it.
Please give a breakdown of how the head tax is distributed presently.
Good evening, everyone. Strand Bodden, Minister of Tourism. So right now there's 3 streams of taxes. The government departure tax, which is $6 CI or $7.32 US, $3 US for the Port Authority, and $1.95 US for the Environmental Protection Fund fee. So that, if you add those up, it comes to $12.27 US.
Some people are saying the cargo port is only running at half capacity. Is that true?
No.
Mr. Woods?
Good evening, Joseph Woods. I'm the Acting Port Director. That is absolutely not so. And I'll explain how the port works. Start from a Saturday night, which is our busiest night. We have one ship then that will bring in nearly, let's say, 170 containers or nearly 300 TEUs. That'll come in on a Saturday night. We move the majority of that from the port to the inland facility Saturday night. Some is still left over for Sunday. Another ship comes Sunday, not quite as fully loaded, and we move those containers to the inland facility as well, along with what was left over the next night. Come Monday, we have the place cleared up and ready for cruise operations during the day, because they have to use the same area we're restoring containers that come off of the ship. Monday evening, we start to bring down empty containers for the Wednesday night ship, and we have to load the barge on Tuesday for Cayman Brac. That same night, we're still bringing containers down so that when the ship comes Wednesday, we have enough containers to put back on that ship, beside unloading the ship. Thursday night, there are 2 ships, a roll on, a roll off, and another lift on, lift off ship. So that's another busy night. And that night the dock looks like a spaghetti maze if you look at all the truck lights running and the heavy equipment moving containers between the 2 ships. And again, we can't move all of those containers that night, so you might recall some of the tax operators saying that they have to work around all of the cargo that's left on there, whether it's boats or cars or flat racks with lumber and pipe and whatnot. But there's just no place else to put it. We're sharing that facility. Friday night, there aren't any ships, so we're bringing containers down for the Saturday night ship. Now, in between all of that, there is the aggregate vessels and the cement vessels. So without those coming in, you're not going to be able to build anything here. So we schedule them for the nights that we don't have cargo ships. So the Monday night, part of the night Tuesday, and Friday night. So the port is busy 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And if somebody's saying it's 50%, I welcome them to come and take a look at it for themselves. They can go by any of the churches around town, Emsley Church, Church of God, any of those places and watch, or even go by our North Terminal and sit down and watch. That port is busy 24/7.
Thank you, Mr. Wicks.
And real quick, if I could just add a little anecdote to allow you guys to understand, throughout this process, we were looking to build and design a pier and cargo terminal that accomplished the goals of everybody involved. And I was on one of the talk show radios a couple weeks ago, and the host kept hounding me that I was a shark and that I was taking advantage of the Cayman Islands government. Throughout the negotiations, throughout this whole discussion, Joey, Will, Strawn, Peter, there was no wavering from the cargo piece being incorporated into this project. It was fundamental and a requirement of getting this project done. So one of the things that people asked and said, and why didn't you guys let some information go out? Why was there nothing told before July? We were negotiating and developing all of this. So we came up with a minimum of 12 designs, I would probably say, that we went through. And the cargo that we settled on is valued at $40 million or so from a construction budget. And when we were looking to figure out a way to bring in some of the costs of this project from a cruise perspective, we were looking at the cargo side. And over again, we were told, and we worked out a win-win agreement with CIG and the Port Authority so that everybody was happy when we walked away. The cruise facility, we got what we wanted and being able to provide a better place for our guests, 4 Oasis-capable berths, and a cargo facility that was a major upgrade and needed and had not been done in 40 years. And it will all be paid for through the head tax of the cruise passengers.
We got in the negotiations some things that other people have never gotten. Number one, we have complete control over the port itself. Usually what happens in the negotiation, the company that's going to develop it takes the control of the port and then operates the Port Authority. That was one of the things that we said could not change. It was a deal breaker from the government's policy standpoint because 96% of the employees at the Port are Caymanian. It's Caymanian all the way to the top. We're extremely pleased with that, and we wanted to protect that and make sure it stayed that way. The second part was the upland development, which the square footage there is protected. The same square footage that you now see at Royal Watler is the square footage that will be built back. And the third was when we looked at all these and had the deal breakers lined up, we had to then, as a government, understand the revenue stream that was going to pay for the cargo port to be built. So the negotiations were putting this into a 25-year license to where the cruise berthing facility actually funds the cargo facility.
If the project is paid for by the cruise passenger tax, is there a set amount per month that must be repaid by the government to the Royal Carnival Group?
There is no guarantees by the government. This is all the financial risk on the cruise lines. If something were to happen that prevented cruise passengers from coming here, unfortunately, all of the risk would still be borne by the cruise lines. And basically what we would do is most likely shift the debt out and pay it back further down the road. But from a risk perspective, if you think about foreclosure perspective, the two companies are underwriting all of the debt and have said no matter what, we will pay it back. The companies, in reality, could pay cash for this, but
in the global markets and how financing works, it's cheaper for us to borrow money and pay it back as long as the banks see that we are willing to put cash down on the barrel, which we are going to do in the sum of greater than $60 million.
If I could just add this point, in addition to there being no financial risk to the government of the Cayman Islands, the fact that the cruise lines only get repaid their investment by head tax on the passengers who come here means they have a real vested interest and incentive to continue bringing passengers here for the 25 years. If the government had gone out, and we had long battles about this, if we had gone out and somehow managed to convince the UK government and come up with the money to build a cruise port without skin in the game by the cruise companies, we might well be stuck with a beautiful cruise pier, cruise port, and for one reason or another, the cruise companies decide that they want to deploy the vessels somewhere else, or they want to reduce the number that come here. One never knows what is going to happen in the world. Now, regardless of what happens, the only way they get repaid is through the head tax on the passengers they bring here. If they don't bring them, they don't get repaid.
And remember, the most important thing about a cruise berthing facility, it's a utility. It's a road that gets people to your country. And what we want from this is the highest spending guests that are going to enjoy our country and leave the most amount of money in our economy. So now all of a sudden, today, there's no incentive for a cruise line to continue to come to Cayman as far as having skin in the game, because they're not invested in anything. So they drop anchor, they pick up their anchor, and they sail away. If they had to move port next week, next month, they're not leaving anything behind in Cayman. If they invest $200 million in Cayman, I think there's a real thought to them that they need to continue to service Cayman. They need to make Cayman a priority as other cruise lines, including the two that are investing here, invest throughout in cruise berthing facilities. But for us as a country, when you start looking at increasing the spend and adding more guests, and the numbers show $100 million more spent in a year from cruise in your economy, those are real numbers, and those are real growth numbers for developing our industry.
I've heard that Carnival has taken over beaches in other islands. How do we know they won't expect to do this here? There is already a shortage of beaches and beach access here.
Could you repeat the first part of it? I didn't quite get. You heard.
How do we know that they won't expect to do this here? There's already shortage of beaches/beach access here. I have heard that Carnival has taken over beaches in other islands. How do we know they won't expect to do this here?
So I will do my best to answer this question without fully knowing the parameters of the question or the... Okay.
I understand that there are certain islands where Carnival has their own section of a certain area of the beach. No other cruise ship tourists can go to their section. They have their own chairs, they carry the labels. The locals can't go there, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's not something that I have. I mean, one of my co-workers who shared this with me today, she experienced it.
So I think what you may be referring to in Carnival in their development of their business model, and I can just give you a historical overview of the cruise industry. Carnival has invested more in what we call private destinations. Royal Caribbean currently has 2 private destinations, Coco Cay and Labadee. Carnival has 6. So that has been a bigger piece of their business model. And so what I can tell you, and I can't answer for the government or any landowners here, is that I do not know of any ability for Carnival to purchase a beach or develop something that large in the region. I know from a Royal Caribbean perspective, we do not have any land in Cayman. We do not have the ability to develop a beach. I can give you an example. Previously, in Falmouth, Jamaica, we had Red Stripe Beach, because at the time, when we opened Falmouth back in 2009, 2010, there was no competitive beach product within a 45-minute radius of Falmouth. We operated Red Stripe Beach for a period of 4 to 6 years. I don't know the exact number. And as the tour product developed and local operators built beaches, we closed Red Stripe Beach because we are not in the tour operations business. As piece of our business model, we do have private destinations, but for Grand Cayman, there will be nothing like a private destination for Royal Caribbean.
So if I can just provide the government perspective on that. So at present, and what is planned or projected, the cruise ships are in the business of bringing cruise passengers here to have Cayman experiences. They have no license or permission to operate a business in Cayman. So even if somebody in the private sector decided they would sell, who has beach land, they would sell it to Carnival or Royal or anybody else, they would still need a license, in this case a local company's control law license from the Cayman Islands government to be able to operate in Cayman. So that would become a policy decision for whoever the government is, whether or not that is something that they wanted. From our perspective, this government absolutely would not even contemplate such a thing. We don't want, and we love them to death, we get on very well with them, but we don't want them operating in our market in Cayman. We want them to bring people here to buy our Caymanian experiences and products and so forth. That's the policy of the government that I lead.
And just as not everything you hear or read is true, we had the exact same question in West Bay, last meeting, public meeting I attended, but it was segways and bicycles. Are you going to allow the cruise lines to bring segways and bicycles off the ship and hurt our cruise and tour product? Royal Caribbean owns no segways, no bicycles. That is not our business. That's not our business model, to the Premier's point. That's not how we operate. And I'm not saying, and I can't speak for Carnival, but I can speak for Royal Caribbean, that we don't have currently any beaches in this area, in this region.
Well, you can see why you would be concerned.
And that's why I'm addressing it, that we do not have it.
Mm-hmm. If weather does not permit the ships to be docked, will the government still collect the head tax from the ships that pass us by?
So I kind of touched on this point earlier. Less than 2% cancellation rate when we currently have a pier. You're going to have an increase if you look at it just those simple numbers. Even if there was no increase in passengers, which we look at, it's a 10% bump of head tax just by a lack of calls being canceled. And that's what the data shows us. No, in those less than 2% that we have cancellations, when we do have a dock, you do not collect head tax. Head tax is not paid when you have a canceled call. But it's a negative for the cruise lines. They do everything that they can to call in the port because our guests purchase an itinerary based on the ports they are going to. They want to come to the port just as much as we want to bring it. I admit that I obsess too much time reading Facebook comments and things related to this deal and the conspiracy theories that are out there, that we force people to line up in front of the tender during this whole process, that we cancel calls on purpose so that people spend more money on our casinos and our food and beverage. Sea day to us is the exact same thing as a port day.
the money and the revenue that comes in are beneficial to us. A guest who is pissed off for a canceled call costs us more money. When we do things like that, we have to do onboard credits. We have to refund guests for all the tours that they purchased. Our goal is to meet the itinerary 100%. How many times have you guys been at an airport and your plane is delayed or canceled and that line lines up behind the counter? We have that every day we cancel a call. We do not want to do it. Our goal is to deliver the product that we sold to you on the internet or through your travel agent, and you go home a happy guest, and you come again, and you tell your friends to sail with one of our lines again.
Outline, please, some of the proposed infrastructure for the increase of cruise passengers. Will Harbor Drive have to be closed off for them to have place to walk, etc., etc.?
I think although we keep trying to get this message out, one of the great misconceptions about this proposed project is that it is going to result in increased numbers of passengers on any given day. The Port Authority remains in control of the process, and the peak numbers, which I think are about 25,000 a day, are what is proposed to remain. What this will do is it will allow the ships to call, bigger ships to call all year long. One of the things that I didn't know until fairly recently, and when I say that in the last year or so, is that the peak season for the cruise industry in this part of the world, certainly with respect to the Oasis class ships, the big ships that have 5,000, 6,000 passengers, the peak season is between May and October. Whereas for stay-over tourism, our peak season is between October and April. So these things complement each other very, very well. The big ships are passing us by because they can't be tendered. Once we have the piers, what we will find is we'll have what the Deputy Premier refers to as a flattening out of the seasonality, so that instead of feast or famine, you have, if not a feast, at least you have a good meal all year long. So the impact on infrastructure is not expected to be significantly more than is currently the case, because instead of having really peak numbers, 30, 35,000 on one day, you'll keep your numbers down around $20,000 passengers all year long. But we are obviously concerned about continuing to develop the infrastructure, particularly the road systems that I spoke about. This is all an integral part of what we're trying to do with the revitalization of Georgetown. And we are all keen on developing more attractions and improving the attractions we have, particularly attractions in the eastern districts. If the ships are here longer, there is a greater opportunity for those things to happen, because there'll be a greater throughput of customers in the eastern districts. So we have all of this very much in contemplation. We just have to get this referendum held on December 19th and then move forward.
I think that was a really good question. If you look at the slide that's being presented now, you'll see that what's actually happened is that the tour buses, the taxis, the transportation is no longer close to the Harbor Drive, to the main road. It's moved away, and it's in a very orderly manner how people are marshaled, and the experience is very comfortable for them to get out of the port. If you think of what happens there on a day when there's over 20,000 people, you see a lot of people walking out and walking around Georgetown. This will be the first time that we have a design and a pedestrian plan and a transportation plan for Georgetown itself, and moving people off of Front Street, we like to call it, and taking them all the way through Georgetown to look at some of the historical buildings there and some of the different offerings and opportunities as you move people in. But the most important thing from this slide is to show that it allows us in a planned manner to better utilize Georgetown itself.
Both the 2009 referendum on the Constitution and the 2012 one-person, one-vote referendum included counts by constituency/district. Why is this voting being treated differently?
Because this is not a vote about constituency issues. This is a national vote about a project of national importance.
If the port doesn't get enlarged and containers can't get unloaded quickly, what happens then? How does that affect our daily life?
I think we've gone through this about 3 times. It would be inefficient. If you were somebody who was in the cement business, you wouldn't be able to depend on the aggregate ship unloading in a timely manner as you plan for it to come in to replenish your stocks. From the standpoint of how the port director explained, the container ships that arrive Thursday, Sunday, they would be backed up, and the containers themselves will be backed up. So again, it'll be inefficient in the way, and you would probably notice how we would notice it at the grocery store, primarily how some of the goods aren't delivered as quickly as they are now.
How many non-Oasis class ships will the dock be able to berth? Is there any specific reason why it was decided to only be able to berth 4 Oasis ships?
We can make 8 if you guys want it. 4 is a pretty efficient number for the growth that's projected in the industry. 40% of the vessels that are on order are of a larger magnitude of the 6,000 plus passenger ships. Additionally, Royal Caribbean is in the ordering stage, so the orders for ships are made in a 6-year window. So basically, if you want a cruise ship built now, you have to order 6 years in advance to get some space at one of the shipbuilders in the world that can build ships along this side. So currently in the order queue, Royal Caribbean has 2 Oasis class and 2 Icon class, which is a similar size ship with larger gross tonnage because it's an LNG ship, which means it has a double hull where the LNG will be shared. We also have in the design phase and in the pre-order stage, which means we're in discussion, a stretch Oasis will be a little bit bigger. This has been taken into consideration for the size of the docks. So this is the best lineup after the government discussed with all of the major cruise lines for the use of the space and the ability to accommodate the most amount of large ships in an efficient manner that won't increase the amount of passengers on a daily basis, but will spread out the ability of the cruise terminal and the cruise berths to accept passengers on a better basis throughout the year.
What are you going to do about spots? Will that be upgraded? Yes. What are you going to do about spots? Will that be upgraded?
Good evening again. From all our indications and our discussions with cruise lines, and I think TJ said it earlier, that there will be less and less use for spots. You will see that Port Authority just paved it, the parking lot, the receiving area. How spots is positioned though in terms of the depth of the water, the position of the reef, things like that, the landowners on both sides, it's really difficult to do too much more in terms of developing spots.
How will elimination of congestion and overcrowding in Georgetown Harbor Front be possible when there are more people? How will elimination of congestion and overcrowding on Georgetown Harbor Front be possible when there are more people?
I think we've just gone through that.
Can the government identify the names of all pro-port players, company and initiatives, and what efforts are being made to properly label all government ad materials as such? Moving along. A lot of people don't realize that only liquor stores in town are duty-free. All other stores pay duty on their goods. How much annual revenue does the CIG make on these stores?
The observation is correct. Most of the duty-free stores really aren't duty-free. They pay a lower level of duty, but I don't think any of us here have what those numbers are at hand.
If the
What will surprise people, because we've heard this over and over, that you bring people to shop duty-free and the government gets nothing out of it. Duty, if memory serves me, watches are 7%. Jewelry is 12%, and fragrances are 27%. So when you start looking at the numbers, it's thousands and thousands of dollars, and we can certainly get those numbers from the Ministry of Finance, but it's thousands and thousands of dollars that the government makes from duty that is paid on what is supposed to be a duty-free item.
This will be our final questions, and due to time, if your questions were not raised this evening, we will be posting them within a couple days on supportourtourism.com. If the coral growth and relocation will be so effective, why are other larger countries not utilizing these methods? If the coral growth and relocation will be so effective, why are other larger countries not utilizing these methods?
Hi everyone, I thought I was going to get off scot-free. My name is Stephanie, I work for Royal Caribbean. I work on sustainability programs. So I don't know if I understand the question completely, but larger countries and, countries of medium size, small size actually do participate in this. And Qatar, there's been large-scale coral relocation projects. There has been in Jordan for pipeline constructions, relocation projects for corals that have been very successful. So again, it's not something that you want to do if you have a pristine reef. You're not going to go out and relocate it for no reason. But if there is a big port project or a pipeline project or big construction project, you will utilize coral relocation, and this does happen in all size countries.
Thank you. That concludes this evening's meeting. I'd like to thank each and every one for coming out and participating by asking their questions, or apologies for not being able to get to all of the questions because time does not permit, but it is approximately 6. Those questions, as I said, will be uploaded on our supportourtourism.com.
I just wanted to make sure we didn't leave anybody with the wrong impression when we said the Port Authority would have the ability to cap the number of guests on a daily basis at 25,000. That doesn't mean we're going to get 365 days out of the year with 25,000. The reason we have an influx of passengers on Tuesdays and Wednesdays is because of our geographical location and where the home port is for the cruise lines. So you have Port Canaveral, you have Fort Lauderdale, and you have Miami. They're not going to sail a ship and come straight to Cayman and then move around and pick their day. They come down and they go to Mexico, they might go into Belize, and then they come. So those 2 days are the ones that we look at capping, and that's how we work out the rough numbers for the year.
Okay. Let's hope that this evening has dispelled a lot of myths that you may have and that you were able to get the answers that you were seeking for. The next meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, December 3rd, and that'll be in the District of East End at the East End Civic Centre. Again, thank you for coming out. Have a good evening.